I wouldn't say that I'm an angry or aggressive person, but I am incredibly angry and incredibly haunted about, what happens to animals.
Is there a way in which people can reconcile different views in the animal activist circles?
There has been a big thing where people say, go to a supermarket or go to a fast food chain or whatever, buy the vegan option and show the demand. You have to speak to their hearts, not to their tummies, and you have to show people that it's not a big sacrifice in 2024, but you've not changed their heart there. Like any other human being, I want to be liked. But if there's one group of people in the world disliking me that I can live with, it's dairy farmers.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to join this candid spiritual community to hear more conversations that will help you become happier, healthier, and more healed. All I want you to do is click on that subscribe button because I love your support. I love seeing all the comments pouring through, all the love pouring through, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to go on this journey with you, whether you're a spiritual seeker or you're just curious about the topic. And we really hope that our conversations will provide you food for thought and inspiration for your own spiritual journey. So join us for honest, candid discussions about spirituality for soul's sake.
For soul's sake, for soul's sake.
Hello and welcome to another episode of For Soul's Sake, a conversation in which we bring to you the best in the world of wellness, of spirituality, and today, for a different flavor, a specialist on animal rights, an author, a writer extraordinaire. We are joined by Newkey-Burden. Please, let's get a round of applause, everyone behind the scenes. Yeah. Chaz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you being here. A little bit about Chaz so you guys get to know him. He writes about veganism and animal rights for dozens of publications, including The Guardian, The Daily Telegraph, iPaper, Byline Times, and others. His expose of the dairy industry was one of 2017's most read articles on The Guardian website. That's incredible. He speaks out about animal issues on TV and radio and at vegan conferences, protests, and festivals. He's the author of several books, including, and some of these I didn't realize, animal rights activist, but also writes about running cheaper than therapy, The Runner's Code, which was named a Sports Book of the Year by Waterstones, and a biography, this is really random and I want to talk about this too, a biography of Taylor Swift, which was a New York Times bestseller. Congratulations.
Thank you.
He tries to follow the path of Bhakti Yoga, so hence the connection, and he once ran an entire half marathon listening to one of Radhika Das's kirtans on loop. I'll take that as my claim to fame. The writer of the biography of Taylor Swift listens to my kirtan.
It was quite an experience. I
really?
started off, I thought, it's a 13-mile run, so I thought I'll start by listening to my favourite of your kirtans. And at the end, I thought I could hear that all over again. And then by the time it was in its second play, I just thought, I'm seeing this through. I'm just going to listen to it the whole time. And I also did that. You get sort of photographers, and I sort of did a pose like that at every single one. So there's about 10 or 15 pictures of me like that. And then two devotees who were running along, they saw my Hare Krishna Runners T-shirt, and we sort of embraced as we ran along. And the purpose of kirtan is not specifically to entertain me on a half marathon, but it does work very well because there's different moods and there's different, I don't need to tell you this, but there's different paces and there's different moods, and there are points in the run where you might want to go a little bit slower, and then there's a bit where you need that bit where it all kicks in to sort of remind you're actually trying to finish this run. You're not just running along listening to the mantra. But no, and I'm doing a full marathon next year, and I'm planning to do the same audio-wise.
Maybe I should join you and try and chant live along. It won't last long, but
you could be in a car.
I could be in a car and cheerlead from the side if you like. I'll try and work it out. But let's get into animal rights activism. The reason why we're doing this podcast, and for you guys at home that are listening, I did an episode a couple months ago with another guest, and we're talking in a particular, with a particular tone and a particular message, and Chas messaged in, and we just spoke about it very honestly, and it was a great conversation on Instagram DMs, if I'm not wrong, and he had a different perspective, and I was really intrigued by that. And I think it's really important that we don't become so tunnel visioned in our view of how veganism and animal rights are portrayed, and hence I'm bringing a different perspective, a different flavor perhaps to the conversation. Maybe you can give us a little bit about the background of how that became your passion project, I guess.
Yeah, well, when I was about 10 or 11, I was already one of those people where if I was in the shopping centre or on the high street and I saw people with a petition or handing out leaflets, you get some people who cross the road to get away from them.
Yeah.
I'm the type who crosses the road to get to them.
To them?
Yeah, to them.
Okay, all right.
Because I think somebody's got an opinion and they're trying to put it out to the world, and I want to know what it is, and I might want to. So even at 10 or 11, I was doing that. And I remember getting a leaflet one day, and it had a picture of a cat in a laboratory with like electrodes stuck to its head, and it was a horrific photo, and it said curiosity will kill this cat, because there's a saying, curiosity killed the cat, curiosity will kill this cat. And it was about animal experimentation in labs, and we had cats at the time who I was very fond of, so even at the age of 10 or 11, that was sort of where it started. And then it's hard to sort of get across how, because I'm ridiculously old now. So it's like I was 10 or 11. This was like 1983, 1984. And,
By the way, you don't look a day of 80,
Thank you. Someone at the manor asked me if I was in my 60s the other day.
Oh,
I'm
no.
still going to go for it. I'd shaved the beard off and it came straight back on as soon as that happened. But so I started looking into it, and there was no internet then. So, to go and find out what is animal cruelty, what is animal rights, what are all these concepts, was harder. You had to write off by post to organisations and wait for leaflets and booklets to come through the post or go to the library, and that became a big passion for me then. And it's strange because nowadays veganism is a big thing, and the focus is on what we eat and what we drink.
Yeah,
but
massively.
then fur and vivisection as an animal experimentation, they were the big hot animal rights topics.
Fur and fashion and clothing,
exactly.
animal products and clothing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so these were the big issues. So those are the ones that I sort of campaigned on as a kid. And I was just a kid, and I didn't always sort of know what I was doing, but that was really where the passion started. And I went to a strange school, which we might speak about later. But one of the good parts of the school was that we ate a vegetarian diet.
I think I already know what the school is.
Yeah, so I was vegetarian already, and
is it in London?
Yes.
Okay,
it was certainly in London then, yeah. And it was a very odd place, but I loved that part of it because I was vegetarian anyway. And certainly if I'd have been a vegetarian in the mid-80s and going to a normal school, that probably would have been quite difficult.
Right.
So
was it
I
a personal choice or family choice?
A personal choice. Oh, yeah. No, I'm completely...
From childhood?
Yeah, completely on my own on that one in the family. I was supported, very supported, particularly by my mother. I must say, whenever I go and see them, she's got a fridge full of vegan foods, and, or vegan, as she calls it.
Vegan.
And I'm a bit vegan sometimes, so... That's where it started.
Yeah, wow. Are they okay now? I mean, now you said fridge full. Family still dropping a few jokes here and there?
Oh, I don't think they dare.
Really? You're ammunitioned up?
Yeah, no, I can... no, I think they've got plenty of other things to take the mickey of me about. I have no end of reasons to be mocked. I think they don't even need to get round to veganism. They can just mock me about other things.
The word activism, in my mind, sparks passionate vibes. It sparks thoughts of a little bit angry, if I'm honest. And it also can turn people off because they feel it is perhaps not so welcoming as just activism. It's the word immediately. That's the kind of stereotype I get in my head, like going out on protest. What are those people usually like? What are they portrayed like in the media? How do you feel about that?
I totally understand it, and to a degree I share it, that perception. I'll say firstly, I'll be honest, I wouldn't say that I'm an angry or aggressive person, but I am incredibly angry and incredibly haunted about, what happens to animals. As you mentioned earlier, I've written lots of exposés and quite hard-hitting pieces for the papers about animal abuse, animal cruelty, and about veganism. In order to write those things, I've had to see things and hear things and read things and watch things, many, 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 many things that will never, ever, I'll never come back from it. I'll never be the person I was, I'm going to go if I'm not careful, but that I was before I did all of that. Now, I'm not the victim here. The victims are the animals I chose to go and watch. But if someone said to me, are you angry? Are you, all of these things, I'd say, well, yeah, to a degree I am, having seen all of that. However, the point is how you then take that forward. And I've always said, you should try and be, if you're going to be, an animal rights activist or a vegan activist, as some people call it, be the animal rights activist or the vegan activist that the animals would want you to be. Be the one who, if a cow in a chained up, or a monkey in a lab, or a elephant still being forced in some countries to dance in a circus, be the one they'd want you to be. They don't want you to go and alienate yourself from people. They want you to go and bring everyone together, so together everybody can start to change and stop some of these awful things that happens. And so I do think that a self-awareness and a constant questioning of yourself is very important in this. You have to constantly be saying, am I doing the right thing here which might change someone's heart, or am I doing something that makes me feel I'm better than them in that moment?
A bit of an ego
It's
thing.
very easy to go down that second route, and I have done. Yeah, that you can go and say things to people, and ostensibly you're trying to convince them of your point of view, but really what you're doing is saying, I'm better than you, and that is a danger. And whether it's a vegan activist or any type of activist or anybody in the world, whether it's even faith people, people who go and preach about it, it's the big challenge. And you will go down that road sometimes. Sadly, it's inevitable, but you should keep it to a minimum. And as you said, where our conversation started was that in a previous episode, which I really enjoyed, there was just a few moments where you and your guest spoke about, not being confrontational and not being this. What I was saying to you and what I say now is that I think that confrontational and frank speaking and all is part of it. It's by no means all of it. It's not even a particularly big part of it. But for those of us who are trying to change, I'll be honest, I want to bring to an end all animal cruelty, and I won't see it in my lifetime. I realise that, but that's what I want to do. I have no shame of saying that, and part of that is confronting people. And I would say, from my own experience, writing articles they were horrific to research and they're horrific to read, even though I've written them as well as I can. The details are horrible, but I get emails, DMs, letters, even still to this day, about articles I wrote 8 years ago about dairy. There was a big one in The Guardian that you mentioned, and I still get messages from people like, I had no idea, I've stopped.
What's the article called?
It's called Dairy is Scary. So if you Google Guardian Dairy is Scary, you'll find it. And people write still now and say, I went vegan, or a lady wrote and said, oh, my whole family, even my little kids, we all read it together and we all went vegan. And so that was a very confrontational. It didn't mince its words at all. No pun intended, mince. But but that is part of it. And I also think that if you look at all social justice movements that have changed the world, whether it's and people, whether it's anti-apartheid,
MLK,
all of these people, they really confronted people and they shook society. And if we look at it in a more spiritual way, when Krishna is speaking to Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita, he's pretty direct at some points. When Arjun is like collapsing in front of him, the first thing Krishna does before he speaks is smile. Like he's not overly indulging him. And numerous spiritual leaders, whether we talk about historical ones like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or people who are doing this now, they shake you as much as they soothe you. They will be very direct. Now, this is not to say that I or any other animal rights activist should be thinking of ourselves in terms of any of these political leaders I mentioned or any of these spiritual leaders, but I think that we can follow their example and we can see that some people need an arm round and a nice little cozy chat to convince them of something.
It's time, place and circumstance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time, place. It's the same, like you mentioned, with spirituality and trying to share spirituality with others. You can get a sense for what the person needs once you've had enough experience in trying to share it. And I totally agree in that the majority of our, work is based on attraction rather than promotion. And definitely removing the ego from our sharing and saying, I'm doing this for a greater purpose rather than... And that's generally... considered to be a humble approach as well, to put yourself out the picture, but put the message first, and it doesn't matter about me. So I can completely understand where you're coming from. And time, place, and circumstance. Some people do need the arm around, and what you're saying is also valid. It's some people need to be confronted with their activities and with their behavior, and Judging that, who needs what at what time, is really difficult. And I guess the bad rap that activism gets, and specifically animal activism, it could be because of individual, or even just the media, the way that's portrayed in the media. Animal activism means that everything you touch has to be completely, otherwise you're as good as the devil, so to say. And how do you deal with people who are of the same belief as you are, but maybe don't have such a mature understanding?
It's so interesting you mention this, because I was just talking to someone about this today. I was saying how often the people who you feel most hurt by and who you can hurt most
in your own circle.
Yeah, they're the ones there. I've had conversations, I'll answer a question in a moment, but I've had, when my dairy article went completely viral in 2017, lots of dairy farmers followed me on Twitter. Not because they like me, but because they wanted to heckle me. Down. If I dare tweet something like, I'm feeling a bit tired today, the replies come up going, you just need to stop being a vegan. And I think I've hold myself open for that. But no, it's very, very difficult. The vegan community is, I don't know many, I know lots of vegans and lots of activists, but I don't know many who are, and I'm not this either, who are particularly chilled about, or backward in coming forward, even within the community, about, this is wrong or that's wrong. There's a vegan festival that happens every year, and we have 3 months every summer now. It's like a vegan tradition of infighting about whether it's right that they use land which is owned by somebody who also owns farms, and people just fight like that.
Right.
And so it is very, very difficult.
It's interesting that the public don't even know about those fights.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for that. And I should have even mentioned it. We're all very united, lovely people. Come and join us.
It's the same in every society. It's the same. Yeah. Friendly fire is the hardest to deal with. If someone's going to attack you from outside of a community, you know where it's coming from almost, and you know what's going to be the narrative. But when it comes from inside the house and it's behind your back, or when it's, people say, no, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or, this is the way we should do it. And it's the same in spiritual circles. People look at me, for example, and say, you've got a beard, you don't wearing any robes, where's your tilak on the head? Why are you not doing it like that? You're completely bogus. And to an extent, they're probably right. To an extent, there's a percentage of what they're saying that's completely fine. They're entitled to their opinion. You can worship the way you want to worship. But at the same time, that infighting is what hampers a message being brought to the wider public. And so what would be your dream? I mean, obviously you're going to say don't argue with each other, but is there a way in which people can reconcile different views in the animal activist circles?
I suppose it's to, as going back to what I was saying earlier, a bit like, be the person, be the vegan or be the activist or whatever that say a cow would want you to be. It sounds weird, I know.
Like
but you know what I mean.
A cow.
Yeah,
okay.
but be the one where you could look at them and you could say, today I did everything I could for you in the best way I knew.
The best way I knew.
So that's one way. But I think the area where I have most sort of disagreement internally is that there's or certainly there has been a big thing where people say, go to a supermarket or go to a fast food chain or whatever, buy the vegan option and show the demand, is how they put it. And I've always said to people that you won't actually change the world just by buying the vegan burger at McDonald's or Burger King. You sort of have to do more than that. And there was a period around this sort of vegan revolution, which seemed to start about 5 or 6 years ago, where people just said, all we need to do is just pile into all of these places, buy the vegan option, and then they'll realise. But I've always said to people, there's not many of us, and it won't make a difference. And the boss of Burger King has said explicitly, their vegan burger did not cause anybody who had previously been buying meat burgers there to buy a vegan burger. All it did was meant that vegans went in and bought it as well. So effectively, this is horrible to say, just bolstering the cow slaughter process by going in. So that's not to say I don't think people should go in, because there's no shop that's pure or whatever, but you shouldn't consider that you're really changing the world there. And sure enough, I wrote that article and I got a lot of heat from vegans about that. And that was about 5 or 6 years ago. There's now more vegans, there's more vegan products, and more animals are being slaughtered.
And more animals are being slaughtered.
Yeah.
all simultaneously happening.
Despite the vegan revolution.
Whoa, you got to
more
repeat that.
So as I always say to people now, I say veganism is very good for the vegans. It's not good enough yet for the animals because it's gone up.
So what do we do about it?
I think you have to change
me.
people's hearts. You have to speak to their hearts, not to their tummies. So sure, if I go up to someone and I go, look, you like burger? Vegan burgers are now very similar. You like, vegan milk, you like a milkshake? They're a really nice vegan milkshake. That's fine and that's important. You have to show people that it's not a big sacrifice in 2024. But you've not changed their heart there. You've just convinced them that you don't really need to make much of a change. And so that person who then go, oh, okay, I'll have the vegan burger. Next week when you're not there, they might say, oh, I have the other burger, because you've not changed their heart and you've not changed their mind. You've just appealed to their sense of pleasure, basically. Yeah. So I think that it's a long process, and ultimately it probably will either, if this does completely change, it'll be for one or two reasons. It'll either be because people realise that the environmental aspect of eating meat could destroy their grandchildren's and great-grandchildren's future. And so out of a more selfish sort of thing, which is fine.
Selfish environmentalism.
Yeah, that might change it. Or if there's a wider spiritual, revolution, I think, ultimately that would do it. Because once you're thinking in that way, you don't need to be told not to pay to have someone to kill some people. But I'm going to slightly contradict myself now in that, or come at it from another way. There are also circumstances where you don't be confrontational and where you don't be frank and where you don't shake people. E.g., when someone's eating is one. Number two is, and I'll start this with a story. At last year's National Animal Rights March, I went home in tears because some Krishna devotees had brought along a small cart with some prasadam in it, with some sanctified food, nuts, raisins and so forth.
This is at
a vegan march, a very militant vegan march. And at the end, at the rally, lots of vegans went up to these devotees and they said, you say that the cow is sacred, but you all eat and use dairy. You're a bunch of hypocrites. And I sat there watching it like my mum and dad were rowing, because I'm a vegan activist, but I'm also trying my best to be a Krishna devotee. And it just broke my heart to see it wasn't a row, because the Krishna devotees didn't row back. They just soaked it up, sort of thing. But I found it very, very upsetting. Now, I get the point. It's very, very strange to say, because all dairy cows go to the slaughterhouse. It's very strange to say,
unless they're protected from life from cradle to grave. Yeah,
which is incredibly rare. Very admirable, the people who do it at the Manor and at the Ahimsa Dairy. Yeah. I ran a marathon for them before I was vegan. Yeah. But it is, I get what the activists meant on one level. It is very strange to say those animals going from a meat farm to the slaughterhouse, they mustn't. They're sacred. We mustn't do this. The cows going from a dairy farm to slaughterhouse, well, we'll look the other way. Because because it's not safe to say because we like eating, because devotees like eating cheese. It's very important. It's too deep to go into. But so why don't I, as someone in that Krishna community, why don't I campaign on that issue? Two reasons. Number one, because I come to Krishna consciousness and spirituality to try and learn, not to teach. And the moment I stray from that for a moment, the whole thing's gone. Yeah. The other reason is, and if I use any terms that aren't 2024 at this point, I apologise, and please anyone correct me, you or anyone in the comments, but as a white Western person, I will not go into an Eastern belief system and start wagging my finger. I won't be that guy. I think a conversation about all of this that I just mentioned might be useful. I think it shouldn't be led by people like me. And there are people who aren't like me, by which I mean people from an Indian people or Indian background who are speaking about this. And I'm happy that they are. And I'm not going to join them because I won't go in. There's been enough people from England and Britain wagging their fingers and worse at Indian people. I'm not going to go and join that. So that would be another example. Just when I just don't get involved.
I highly admire that. But also, you have a right. I understand that spirituality, despite originating from the Eastern cultures like Krishna Bhakti, etc., despite originating there, it knows no culture and race. And so on the flip side, I guess as an Indian-bodied person, I guess I won't get the wagging the finger. Maybe I will. But the point is that I think it's okay. It's, you know, you've made a choice, and I respect that, and I actually admire you for your choices, for not saying it at the dinner table at the meal time. I think that's very admirable and very cultured thing. To not do it. What were the other two that you mentioned in summary? The two other reasons,
Well,
or two other times where you.
Yeah, I mean, it was not to go into. Well, it was the one about, you know, the Krishna community. That was the other one. Yeah, to not go in and start doing that. To leave that conversation to people.
Because you come as a student.
Yes.
And because also you're acknowledging, the body in which you're in.
Yeah.
So very admirable. I really appreciate that. If someone was dealing with family that were trying to accept, we can have it as an animal activism point, but any sort of decision change, whether it be a spiritual tradition that they follow, whether it be a change in gender, which I'm seeing more and more, and I'm really trying to understand it. If I'm honest, it's quite a new world for me, because when you're someone that doesn't have to be in front of a microphone, you don't have to have so much education about everything. Like, you know, you just know enough about things to be able to speak about them in a fair, equal way. And this is something I'm completely learning for the first time. So whether it be that, or whether it be trying to convince your parents that it's okay that I'm turning vegan. Do you have any words of advice for someone that's trying to get a hard message across?
Yeah,
because you gave one, which was to speak as though you're thinking, what would the animals think of you? And I think that's really beautiful. I've never spoken to an animal, by the way, but I'll try it. But any advice on someone that's trying to change?
Yeah, put yourself in their shoes, empathize with them. I remember I watched a documentary once, and it was with a group of, following the story of a group of young gay guys, and they were about to come out to their families. And I noticed that throughout their conversation, it was all about how they would feel, because they were scared to tell their parents. And this is just one documentary, I'm not talking about anybody else. I just thought, I've not heard one of you say, I'm really worried that this is going to be too much for my mum.
Right.
Or I'm really worried that my dad might drop dead with a heart attack if I tell him, sort of thing. This is obviously a slightly dated program. Things are a bit different now, but the same goes for veganism. The same goes for, you know, having a different belief system, which is obviously something I've gone through in my family. It must be strange for them, but you're rejecting what they did for you as a child. So, like, for me, I was baptized as a child in the church. I was fed, you know, meat, eggs and dairy and stuff, you know, from the beginning of my life. And then suddenly I turn around and I say, I'm not going to do this. And I'm therefore saying, you know, everything that you well, not everything, but those things that you brought me up with, I'm now rejecting.
Yeah.
And that's
it's a hard pill to swallow.
hard, you know, because so that's what I would say. If you have to purely put yourself in their shoes and recognize that fact, and then just move forward from there. But also there is a saying, and you know, in religion, of, you know, don't cast your pearls before swine. You do sometimes, whatever you're talking about, you have to think, is there a point? Do you have a line where you just go, I won't go beyond there. If I've tried this and this and this, and this person just won't accept it, do I have to accept that they won't accept it, rather than you know, continuing to sort of bang on at them about it?
Know where the line is.
Yeah. But I do feel sad for people whose families won't accept it, because it's interesting you asked me earlier, because I have kind of taken that for granted, that my family have been
very accepting.
Very accepting of it. And of course there are some, because I see on social media vegan friends where it comes towards Christmas or whatever, you know, they're saying, oh, there's going to be 20 of us around the table and I'm going to be the one vegan, and it's going to be, you know, hell. And that must be difficult. But the other thing to do in all circumstances, if you're upset as a vegan or whatever, is just to recognise who as I said earlier with my research, you know, just recognise who the victims are. And, you know, if you have to sit through an awkward meal with your family at Christmas, it must be hell. And but it's not as bad as, you know, being in a lab or being in a factory farm.
Yeah, that's valid. And I mean, on that point, and not to minimize it, but also just to try and offer some help, Mahatma Gandhi said something along these lines, and you're going to have to Google it and find out and drop it in the comments. He said, first they'll mock you, then they'll hate you, then they'll respect you.
Mm.
And being firm with our resolve and not being proud and firm, being humble, which humility, again, let's contextualize. It doesn't mean to think less of yourself. Humility doesn't mean I'm so crap. I need to just be, out of the. It doesn't mean you have to avoid being courageous and bold. They're completely different things. Humility doesn't mean to think less of yourself. It means to think about yourself less. It means to be less self-absorbed. That I'm doing something. Look at me. I'm spiritualist. Huh? I'm a vegan. Look at me. That's the thing we have to avoid, in my opinion, is this false sense of pride that what you're doing is for a greater purpose or greater another being, even if it's not greater, but another being, whether it be a higher being, whether it be your fellow being, recognizing that the way I'm living is for higher purpose, and it's not about my purpose all the time. I know that needs to also be satisfied. So acting with humility and being firm with the resolve, it has seen like anything that I've tried to convince or to allow people to accept about the changes that have happened in my life, everything from teenagehood to adulthood, that, we all have different decisions that we have to try and help people understand our choices on. If we can do them with firm, humble resolve, I think that can create change over time. And it sounds cliche to say, just give it time, just give it time. But I think, as the holy Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots going backwards. Sorry, did I get that right? Can't connect the dots going forwards. You can only connect them going backwards. Anyway, I can't remember the quote exactly. But the point is that over the period or the passage of time, we'll be able to see that everything happened for a reason. And usually that reason is to help us either be humbled, to recognize we're not at the center of the universe the whole time, is either because we had to learn our voice and what that sounds like and how to empathize with other people, like you mentioned. There's so many different reasons why particular situations and scenarios are cropping up, so that maybe in the future you can help someone else to also understand the same point, or to better advocate in a more mature way. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that generational aspect of it, because there's an activist called, or there was, called Gary Yourofsky, who, goodness knows how many vegans walking around today were directly vegan because of him.
Gary Yourofsky.
Yourofsky, yeah. He's I warn people if they go and look at him, he really doesn't mince his words, but
he's still present. He's doing his thing.
Yeah, he's still present, but he's not doing it anymore. In 2017,
is there a reason why?
I think he probably burnt out. And I think that he actually did probably suffer a lot from what you said of the infighting, because it's quite an involved sort of thing. But because he's so blunt, he then came up against the wider social changes and social attitudes where he would say things that people didn't like. And I'm not talking about things to do with animals. He would use language, he would use terms that suddenly became less relevant. And he clearly couldn't, I don't think he could stop doing that. So I think he created such impact in goodness knows how many years, not many. And then he wrote this statement the day that he stopped, and it ended, I'm passing on the baton to you. You all go out there and fight. So one day you can pass on that baton and say to someone, it's your turn now. And it really hit me hard, because that happened the same week as my dairy article came out. And I can't begin to say the madness of that week, the amount of
Were you expecting it?
Abuse.
Yes, no?
To a degree, yeah. So what happened was I kept writing these opinion articles about different aspects of it. And then I really wanted to write dairy because that's probably my key
Passion
issue, because
project.
cows are my favourite animals, and because the processes are so horrific in the modern time. And and I remember when it went live, it was like at about 8:30 in the morning. And normally articles go through, like, you'll be sent an edit and you'll send it back. There might be some legal queries. Can you send another, link to back things up? I always send the evidence, but sometimes I ask for more. And suddenly it was just live. And I went onto Twitter to post it on. And, when you look on social media, you suddenly see that little number, that little red thing in your mentions or your @s or whatever. And it was
notifications.
Yeah. And it was just
Ping,
it
ping,
was
ping,
just
ping,
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 ping
ping.
as I did, and it was lots and lots of people saying nice things, lots of people saying they were really shocked, but there was a lot of people from the dairy industry who were really going at me. Now, I can only be honest. I, like any other human being, I want to be liked. But if there's one group of people in the world disliking me that I can live with, it's dairy farmers. If there has to be someone who hates my guts, I want it to be them.
Right.
And although I'd rather nobody did, of course.
Right.
But so it's quite a wild week, and so I was sort of expecting it, but it went on day after day after day. I thought it'll be a mad day, and then tomorrow someone will write something about trans issues or something, and everyone will forget. But it went on and on. By the Thursday,
wow.
I think it was on the Monday it started. By the
4 days in.
Thursday, I was getting like dairy farmers tweeting saying someone broke into my house last night, and I'm blaming me,
The
not
hell?
directly, but sort of saying it's all because of him, and more, threats and abuse and all sorts of stuff. There was someone who said, I'd like to drag you by the hair around my dairy farm. I said, well, good luck with that. And there was another one who said, I remember he a dairy farm, he said there were so I have lots of photos. I spend a lot of time cuddling cows. And so he'd seen them all. And he'd been arguing with me for about half an hour back and forward on Twitter about, does the mother cow get upset when the baby's taken away in dairy? And I was like, well, no, they do. And he knew that they did, but we're arguing back and forward, and he's claiming that they didn't care. And then I ended up managing to end the argument on a respectful tone. And then he said, by the way, he came back later, he said, I really appreciated how you did it. He said, by the way, I've seen lots of photos of you with cows and farms and stuff and in fields. He said, just a word of warning, if you see the cows and they're with their calves, I'd advise you not to go with them because the mums are really, really protective of them. And I said, well, hang on, a minute ago they didn't care. So that was quite funny. But that was the week and at the end of the week, every dairy board in Britain apparently all united for the first time and put out a statement condemning me, which I've got on my wall at home. I'm so proud of it.
Send me a picture later.
Yeah, and so I loved that. And but that was the same week as that guy stood down. Gary Orofsky stood down, so it sort of felt like a big week. But what it felt like more than anything was that in that moment, something definitely changed. Like dairy became much more sort of punched through as an issue. And I'm not saying therefore it's my turn to hand over the baton. This was me taking the baton, but I was very, very proud of that, even though it is quite scary when you're in the middle of it all as well.
Yeah. You're a brave soul. I was recently watching a program on Amazon Prime, Clarkson's Farm, Jeremy Clarkson and his farm. And I sat with it, not really knowing what it was going to be about. So first season went by, I think I was okay, because there was no slaughter then. Second season, I think the pigs came in. And I was like, fast forward. And then the third season, the cows came in. I was like, just shut the iPad. And I was like, I can't watch this anymore. It's too much. And I think everyone's got their own threshold. It's an interesting world we live in, where we feel desensitized to the things in the world which we're uncomfortable with and that we know are wrong. I think we live in a world where it's normal for these things to happen, and I think it's going to take courage on behalf of everybody that feels even a slight gut wrench, when we see atrocities of any nature. It's going to take courage to be labeled abnormal. Bhakti Tirtha Swami, I quote this a lot because it's like one of my favorite quotes. He says that we should resist the urge to become normal because living a normal life means insanity. Insanity. And in that insanity, how can we justify the things that are going on? Anyway, passion moment over. You make your own decisions about it. I think it's important that we all decide to what level do we advocate for the atrocities and things that we feel are unjust in the world. And I really respect you for messaging me first and foremost, for getting in touch with me and giving me a new perspective. And I'll be honest, when you first sent me that message, I was like, oh crap, like maybe I made a mistake or something. And I was really feeling a little bit deprecating about it. I was like, no, let's do something about it. Let's be positive about it, and let's try and find an opportunity for you to come in and give your opinion. And I think it's been quite wonderful.
Well, I can say for definite you didn't make a mistake because firstly, I want to say, like, it was weird because I listen to your podcast every week and I wait for it, like, on a Monday. And
That made me all feel good.
because Monday's
giddy.
often the day that I go to Bhaktivedanta Manor Temple. So it's sort of like lots goes on a Monday. It's a lovely way to start the week. And I was weirdly so affected by that episode. And I was walking around and I was going, don't worry, it was absolutely none of your business what he puts on your podcast. And then I thought, on his podcast, not your podcast, his podcast.
It's yours now too.
Yeah, I'm here to take over. But but what I loved about it from what you did was you straight away said, let's do voice notes so we can hear each other. So we know, so we understand what we're doing, because I think we've met before in other contexts. And, I know you're not a fighter. You know that I'm not, I might be an expert, but I'm not a fighter of a person.
I know that.
And
I knew that.
so we just, our tones, we heard each other's tones. But no, you didn't make a mistake, because the important thing is it's a multiplicity of tactics. And so your conversation then, what you were both saying, that's a big part of it. The sort of the way that I come in is a big part of it. The people who do all sorts of other things, the people who are making better and better vegan alternatives for food is a big part of it. It's not all of it, but it's a big part of it. And together, everyone's doing what they're doing. And so it wasn't a, I love, what your other guest, was talking about. And, I love sort of what I talk about. And together, is how you sort of change the world.
Yeah.
And a lot of these movements we talked about did by having essentially a good cop, bad cop. So if you look at Stonewall, and there was a group, I don't know if they're still going, called Outrage, who were really, really hardcore militant activism. And Stonewall were more having conversations, sort of receptions in Parliament and all of that. But they knew, as they dealt with politicians and asked them to change laws about human rights, they knew that outside were the bad guys who would do all sorts of, who would be more direct. But we can be that person ourselves.
Of course.
We can be both of them ourselves. And it's definitely many, many tactics is how we change people's hearts.
Yeah, and we have to be strategic about it, because like Martin Luther King said it. He said, those who love peace need to be as organized, as effectively as those who love war. And people who propagate war and atrocity, they don't take a break. They don't think, what's a kind of easy way to do this? And they're really organized. They really know what they're doing. They know how to trigger people, how to tick people off, how to encourage violence. They know, and they understand human psychology. I think those who are peace lovers and want to try and create harmony sometimes don't think so strategically. I think it's something that I really want to encourage, because it's part of why what I do, I try to be as organized as possible, because I know that's what's gonna take. It's that energy is going to be required. And so, I really love you for everything you're doing, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. And in the comments, just shower Chaz with loads of love. I really want to see you go crazy with lots of appreciation for his message and his mature way of, in my opinion anyway, really giving his cause a voice. And thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I really appreciate you. See you guys on the next episode of For Soul's Sake. Peace.
If you love this episode, you'll love my interview with Keshava on serving others and how our life gets ironed out in the process. Go check it out.
When I have managed to find that selflessness, that sense of it's really not about me, but I'm really here as a servant to give, then I found two things happen. The first thing is that our ability to actually really serve others just expands exponentially.